Six Flags Great Adventure, located in Jackson, New Jersey, has been home to 31 different coasters over the years. I've been lucky enough to ride 17 of them. Today I'm going to be ranking them from worst to best. Welcome back to my channel, everyone, and if you're new, welcome. I make tons of theme park content from the latest news in the industry to reviews, construction vlogs, and more. If that's something that interests you, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video. My next goal is to reach 500 subscribers by the end of September, and I would love for you to be a part of my journey. I would also like to add that this ranking is my own opinion. I know I might sound biased on a few of these rides since I did have the chance to work on them while I worked for Six Flags, but I'll try my best to give my honest opinion. Now anyways, on to the video. Built by Warner Leroy, the park opened in 1974 as just Great Adventure. In the fall of 1977, Six Flags purchased the park, where it became Six Flags Great Adventure. The park had a few challenging years, especially in the 1980s when a few major accidents occurred, like the Haunted Castle, which took the lives of 8 teenagers when the walk-through attraction caught on fire, the Lightning Loops accident, where a woman was ejected from the train due to not being properly restrained. And also 2 deaths also occurred on Rolling Thunder, the first being a guest who choked on the ride, and another being an employee who did not properly restrain himself in the ride vehicle. Due to these accidents, Six Flags greatly increased ride operator training procedures, and also began to add more and more new attractions to draw guests back to the park, many of which you're going to see on this list. Before we begin the list, here are a few honorable mentions of rides that I have seen in person, but unfortunately have not had the chance to ride. Viper. Built in 1995 in the location currently occupied by El Toro, originally the ride was supposed to be themed to the Unforgiven franchise, but the theme was deemed as too dark, so the park chose the name Viper instead. Viper was designed and manufactured by Toro. Being a prototype model for the company, Viper included the first of its kind dive loop, which was an inline twist at the top of a vertical loop that was just tilted on its side. The ride also featured a Heartline roll found on their Ultra Twister models, but this time it went through with a full-size train. The park also opted to add more of the rings around the ride track so it better fit the Viper theme and looked more like a snake. Now we all know that Togo has a reputation in the United States as being one of the worst coaster manufacturers ever, and unfortunately Viper was no different. It didn't take long for the coaster to start showing a ton of issues, and by 2001 the coaster was shut down for the entirety of the season. The goal was to try to upgrade the attraction and fix the issues with the ride. The ride reopened in 2002 with some of the same issues, and by the end of the 2004 season, the park decided to call it quits and remove the ride. I remember being a little kid and finally being tall enough to ride it in 1999, but when we came back to the ride, it was closed and stayed closed for the rest of the day. Little did I know that was my last chance that I would ever be able to ride this attraction, as my next time to the park was in 2005. Batman the Chiller. Built by Premier Rides, Batman the Chiller was a part of the Doing linear induction motor launch coaster concept. Opening for just a very short period of time in 1997, the ride quickly closed to address some major issues it was having with its electrical system. The ride stayed closed until the 1998 season, where it was marketed as the new ride for 1998. Over time, changes were made to the pair of coasters as a last-ditch effort to keep them open as much as possible. Sadly, Batman was the side of the coaster they decided to keep closed more often due to the amount of power that it took to run, as the limbs needed more power to climb higher up onto the spike. That way it would have enough momentum to make it back to the station. Sadly, I never actually got to see Batman operate with guests. There was one time in 2005 I did see it test, but it never actually opened to riders. It really is such a shame because this coaster looked like it was the better of the two sides. Jersey Devil Coaster. After being delayed from 2020 to 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Jersey Devil Coaster was the world's first large-scale RMC single-rail Raptor model. Sadly, when I went to the park in 2021, it wasn't quite ready to open to guests yet, and it opened a little less than 2 weeks later. One day I'll get my chance to ride it, but it's probably not going to be anytime soon. Now on to the ranking. Number 17, Road Runner Railway. As a part of the Warren Lines, Road Runner Railway is a Zamperla gravity coaster. This small kiddie coaster is great for little kids just starting out on coasters. The ride closed in 2019 due to construction of the Jersey Devil coaster, and was rebuilt in another location in the kids section by Jersey Devil. The kiddie coaster was given a new name, theme, and paint job to match its big brother, and was renamed Little Devil Coaster. I have not been on the re-theme of this coaster yet, but it does look really nice. But due to its small size and low thrill factor, it still does place last on my list. Number 16, Harley Quinn's Crazy Train. Also added as part of the Warren Lines, this coaster opened in 1999 as Blackbeard's Lost Treasure Train. Built by Zier, this Tivoli large model is a great family coaster. What makes this coaster even better is the fact that it does 2 laps around the track. This coaster was rethemed in 2016 to Harley Quinn's Crazy Train to tie in with the addition of the Joker that opened in the same year right next door. This ride doesn't have much theming, but the forces on the ride and the back of the 20-car train are really fun. Number 15. Runaway Mine Train. Runaway Mine Train is one of the best mine train coasters in my opinion. This coaster opened with the park in 1974 and was designed by Aerodynamics. The coaster has a height of 60 feet and hits speeds of 38 miles per hour. To say this coaster is janky is an understatement. The ride has some very rough transitions, so bad in fact that a few years ago the park actually replaced a few sections of track and also did some modifications to try to smooth out the experience. It didn't really work, but I'm okay with it. I love the ride's roughness. The ride has also had a few other modifications done to it over the years. The brakes were replaced from skid brakes to a modern fin brake, the 2 across lap bars were swapped out for individual lap bars, and the lift motor was replaced to a variable speed lift, which means that when the lift hill is not in use, it goes into an idle speed. And once the ride senses a train on the track approaching the lift hill will go into the full speed, and then once it clears the lift, it goes back down to the slower speed. Honestly, I love this coaster. This was the first big steel coaster I went on back in the late 90s, and I've always loved it. The best part of this ride is easily that ejector hill that goes right into that turn over the water. Even though this ride does have some thrilling elements, it is a fantastic family coaster. Number 14. The Dark Knight Coaster. Opening in 2008, the Dark Knight Coaster is a mock Wild Mouse and is the third and final coaster at Great Adventure to be themed after Batman himself. The coaster is one of the first attempts in the late 2000s to start delivering a themed experience at the park. When you enter the building, you are greeted by a pre-show showing the Joker is now in control. You try to escape through a subway system which leads you to your ride vehicle. The ride experience is a basic Wild Mouse, but I will say it's actually quite enjoyable and very smooth. The ride takes place in almost complete darkness. You fly by many static figures and cutouts during the ride, and you also get a great effect on the final brakes right before the station. Overall, I think this coaster is quite enjoyable. It's just not as good as many of the other rides in the park though. Number 13. Skull Mountain. Opening in 1996, Skull Mountain is an awesome family thrill coaster. Built by Intamin, this is another indoor coaster, except this one's just better than the Dark Knight in every way possible. You start off by entering the building with a giant skull-faced waterfall. After you make your way through the caves and pass behind the waterfall, you arrive in the theme station. The ride's trains only have 1 lap bar per row, so if you're a smaller guest riding with a larger guest, you are sure to get some really great airtime. Speaking of airtime, this coaster has an amazing pop of air in the last row going down the first drop. Over the years, this coaster has seen a few changes, like the addition of VR in the fall of 2016, and has also had some props moved in and out of the show building depending on the time of year. No matter what time of year it is though, Skull Mountain is for sure the best family coaster at the park. Number 12. Green Lantern. Originally opening as Chang at Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom in 1997, Chang was sent over to Great Adventure and reopened as Green Lantern in 2011. Built by B&M, the stand-up coaster originally opened at the park with 3 trains, but only 2 trains were actually delivered from Chang. The park ended up borrowing a 3rd train sent over from Six Flags Magic Mountain. After the first season, the park was forced to send that 3rd train back to Magic Mountain, and the ride has been running on 2 trains ever since. The ride has received mixed reviews from the start, with many complaining that the forces being placed on your legs were too much. While at times I do think this is true, honestly it's really not that terrible. Personally, I'm just not a huge fan of this coaster just because of the headbanging it provides. At times the coaster can really bash your head into the harness, but in my last few visits to the park, the ride is actually been getting noticeably smoother. But it has been a few years since I've actually been able to get on the ride. Overall, it's not one of my favorite coasters in the park, but it's also not completely terrible either. Number 11. The Joker. Opening in 2016, the Joker is a 4D free fly coaster manufactured by S&S. Honestly, I believe these rides get a lot more hate than they should. I personally love this model of coaster. They're extremely unpredictable, and this version in particular has a feature that there are magnets on the lift hill that make the cars rock as you're climbing up the vertical lift at 120 feet in the air. I know I placed this at number 11, which is far from my favorite at the park, but that's just because this park is stacked with so many amazing coasters. I do love this ride. Number 10 and number 9, Rolling Thunder. Since these coasters have very similar ride experiences, I'm going to be grouping them together. Opening in 1997, Rolling Thunder was a William Cobb Racing wooden coaster. This coaster did not feature a mirrored layout like most racing coasters of its time. The ride featured different sized hills at different points of the ride, but at all times during the course, the trains were always racing each other. The ride originally opened with 5 cars per train with 3 rows per car. That was quickly dropped just down to 4 cars though. After a couple of years, the park ran the left side backwards for a little bit before switching it back to its forward facing position. As the years went on and coasters at the park got bigger and faster, the ride's popularity quickly diminished. Eventually, the ride was torn down in 2013 to make room for Zumanjaro Drop of Doom's queue-line, but honestly, I miss this coaster so much. This was the first major coaster I ever rode back in 1998, and I always made sure to give this a few laps every time I went to the park. I'm not gonna lie, I did like the right track a little bit more due to the speed hill after the first drop, as well as the intense turnaround. So I'm going to be placing the left track at number 10 and the right track at number 9. This coaster also had some really intense laterals on the last turn into the brakes. I'm so happy I got the chance to ride it in its last week of operation, but I do wish the park was able to keep this one around just a little bit longer. I hope the park finds the budget to finish the memorial for the coaster. For those who don't know, they actually left a piece of the first drop that went under El Toro in place. You can see it from Zumanjaro's queue line. The idea was to have a monument for the attraction with 2 trains going down the first drop, so you'd be able to see it from the queue line. Unfortunately, that just never happened. Number 8, Robin the Chiller. This coaster has the same story as Batman the Chiller. The only difference is that Robin sometimes actually operated. I had the chance to ride this a couple of times in 2005, and it was awesome. The Zero G roll is one of the best ones I've ever ridden. You flew through this inversion, but it also felt like you took the inversion in 2 parts. You could feel the intense jolt that would flip you upside down, yet somehow it felt like a stall. And then you would feel another intense jolt, and then you were right side up. I've never felt another Zero G roll like that to this day, and I've been on over 400 different coasters. It was wild. It's a shame that the park wasn't able to invest more to get the attraction working like it was intended to, but I completely understand why it was removed since they spent way too much money on the attraction in general. Number 7, Batman the Ride. Following the success of Batman the Ride at Six Flags Great America in 1992, Batman opened at Great Adventure for the 1993 season to extreme popularity. Being one of the only inverted coasters in the world at the time, Batman became an instant favorite due to its smoothness and intensity. The ride opened with a very immersive queue line. You entered Gotham City Park, where you would eventually make your way into the sewer, then into the Batcave, where you would see Batman's suit and the Bat Signal. Besides being painted a couple of times throughout the years and getting theming removed, the ride really hasn't seen many changes over the last 30 years of operation. In 2015, the park did add a backwards-facing train to the coaster so that you would experience the coaster in reverse. By doing this, the ride was only able to run with 1 train and went down to 7 rows instead of the intended 8 rows. While the coaster was very fun backwards, the increase in wait times were not. Thankfully, this didn't last long though, as the train was sent around the chain to be used at other parks. Overall, Batman is a really fun ride, and the intensity is awesome, but it can be too much at times. But I can also see why Six Flags decided to clone this ride and send it to most of the parks. Number 6, Medusa. Medusa opened in 1999 as the world's first floorless coaster. Built by B&M, the coaster uses their standard sit-down style of track, but also uses a unique system to remove the floors as well as reinstall them every single cycle. The ride opened to tremendous praise as the guests loved the illusion of hitting their feet on the rails. After the first few seasons though, the ride's popularity did start to die down, mainly due to the ride's terrible location in the back corner of the park, hidden behind the Northern Star Arena. In 2009, the ride's first major change came when the ride was transformed into Bizarro. The ride added new theming, new fire effects, a new paint job, and a new onboard sound system. While the ride looked cool, it did not fit in at all with the western theming of the area. A few years after Bizarro opened, the ride's audio was removed, and by 2022, the coaster returned back to Medusa with its brand new paint scheme and new storyline. This ride is a ton of fun, and is extremely underrated. I make it a point to ride this every time I'm in the park, and I also ride it multiple times when I'm there. This is my 3rd favorite floorless coaster behind Superman Krypton Coaster and Kraken. Number 5, Superman Ultimate Flight. Opening as the world's 3rd B&M flying coaster in 2003, Superman Ultimate Flight is an amazing coaster. It is a clone of Six Flags Over George's version with the same name, but comes with a few changes, specifically with the station setup. Superman at Great Adventure is only able to run 2 trains, and only has 1 station versus Over George's version, which has 3 trains and 2 stations. Over George's Superman is also a terrain coaster, where Superman at Great Adventure was placed on a flat plot of land. The cool thing about Superman at Great Adventure is that the turns towards the end of the ride are a little bit higher, which gives a great sensation of flying. I have a soft spot for this coaster, as I had the chance to work on it in 2013 and 2018. I made a ton of memories with a lot of people at this ride, so it holds a very special place in my heart, but overall I also love this ride and it is a lot of fun. Number 4, Great American Scream Machine. I know a lot of you are going to judge me for putting this ride this high on my list, but honestly I don't care. I loved this coaster. Opening in 1989, Great American Scream Machine was an aero mega looper that has been known to be the coaster that saved Great Adventure. Due to all the accidents that occurred in the 80s at the park, attendance dropped to concerning levels. Six Flags knew that they had to start making major investments to draw guests back into the park, and Scream Machine was their answer. Scream Machine was the coaster that I always tried to go on as a little kid, but my mother would never let me. I would get extremely excited as a kid rolling up to the park and seeing this coaster on the other side of the parking lot. I remember having picnics in the parking lot with my family and just watching the ride cycle over and over again and thinking one day I'm going to be tall enough to go on it. That day wouldn't arrive until 2005, and I loved the coaster after my very first ride. It quickly was in my top 5 at the park. I loved the pure intensity of the coaster and the extremely long ride time. My favorite moment was the hill going into the block break in the front row. The airtime was perfect to me. I've also always been a huge aero looper fan, and I've never found the coaster to be rough except for the transition going into the corkscrews. Like Rolling Thunder, I was able to ride this coaster in the last week of its operation. I remember driving for 6 hours in the middle of the night for my chance to say goodbye, and I remember marathoning that coaster for the entire last hour that the park was open. I wish the park didn't remove this and added Green Lantern somewhere else in the park. If the park added the new generation trains that had the vest restraints, this ride would be amazing. But sadly, they weren't around yet. Number 3, Nitro. Nitro opened back in 2001, and honestly, not much has really changed with the ride. The ride had an incredible station soundtrack until it was semi-removed in 2021. Honestly, there's not really a ton to say about this coaster, besides I love it. The airtime is amazing, the helix is forceful, and the finale is perfect. I often go back and forth between Mako and Nitro to see which one is my number 1 B&M hyper. Most of the time though, it ends up being Nitro. Number 2, King Ka. Opening in 2005, King Ka opened as the world's tallest and fastest roller coaster, reaching heights of 456 feet and speeds of 128 miles an hour in 3.5 seconds. This coaster is a rush. Ka was the first coaster I ever followed the construction progress on when I was 14 years old. I remember staying up late looking at the latest construction vlogs from the park that they would post on their website. I went to the park in 2005 to go and ride King Ka and remember being extremely disappointed due to the coaster being closed due to an accident during testing. It wouldn't be until 2007 that I would get back to the park and be able to ride it. All I could say was wow. In 2017, I had the chance to work on the ride for a little bit and launch some of the trains. I was also able to get a rollback on the coaster on its very last day of operation in 2017. Let me tell you, it felt like all of my dreams had come true. My love for the coaster is one of the main reasons that I named my channel after it. The ride experience is short but very intense. The airtime is fun on the top hat and on the bunny hill. I don't find it rough at all like a lot of people say. There is a rattle, don't get me wrong, but it's not as bad as many make it out to be, especially if you sit towards the front of the train. Ka is amazing and does not deserve all the hate that it gets. And finally, number 1, El Toro. This is the best coaster at Great Adventure, no questions asked. Opening in 2006, this Intamin coaster hit instant fame due to its insane ride experience. The coaster has one of the best first drops I have ever been on, especially in the back car. You then also have the double camelbacks following immediately after the first drop. And we can't forget about that Rolling Thunder hill. This ride is perfection. The coaster has had a few issues over the last few seasons, but thankfully the park took the time to replace the track and make a ton of other enhancements to the coaster. Due to these enhancements made to the coaster, Toro should be around for many years to come. Alright guys, that's going to do it for the video. I know it's been a long one, but tell me what your thoughts are. Do you like long videos like this, or would you rather me do shorter videos? Do you agree with my ranking? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to also leave a like and don't forget to subscribe so you can get more content like this. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye.